No matter how different we are from each other, everybody has a shadow. It is a constant companion, always with us no matter where we go. Unless where we go is in a room with all the lights off, of course. As a child, shadows seemed mysterious or even terrifying. But as we get older, we learn that shadows are nothing to be concerned about, just your body blocking light. Of course, at the SCP Foundation, nothing is what it seems, and a shadow is never just a shadow. Near an abandoned Air Force base in Afghanistan, nestled next to a set of human remains, the Foundation discovered an unusual object capable of turning a simple shadow into a prison. SCP-272 is an iron nail, 11.5 centimeters in length, covered in engravings of an unknown origin. The engravings have not yet been identified or traced to a specific civilization, but the research staff assigned to the object have described them as captivating but scary. It was discovered during a sweep pulled out of a rock face by a member of Foundation personnel. At first, he believed it to be an ordinary nail, until he dropped it. Suddenly, for no apparent reason, he was unable to move from the spot. He stood there calling out for help for 20 minutes before another member of personnel picked up the nail and he regained full range of motion. SCP-272, like many other objects in Foundation containment, is almost eerily mundane. Aside from the engravings on its surface, the nail looks like any other nail you might find scattered on the ground. Its true nature only reveals itself if you happen to drop it. Determined to learn more about the nail's properties, limitations, and potential unknown adverse effects, the Foundation conducted a series of experiments. The first experiment was conducted at the discovery site for SCP-272, the rock face in Afghanistan. A D-class referred to as D-272-01 was handed the nail and instructed to hammer it into his shadow in the area of his feet. Once the nail was 2/3 into the rock, 01 was no longer able to move. He attempted to run but could not lift his feet. He stood there sweating and immobile until he collapsed from heat stroke. At this point, a researcher intervened and attempted to carry the unconscious man out of the sun. No matter how hard they tried, his body could not be moved until they removed the nail. 01 was taken to a hospital and administered fluids and a medical exam, and testing was suspended for the day. After determining that the nail immobilizes its victims by trapping their shadows and them in place, the research team wanted to test the limitations of this effect. If the nail needs a shadow to work, then what happens when there is no shadow present? A new D-Class 02 was selected and brought into the same discovery site. This time, however, they went after dark at approximately 10 p.m. The nail was dropped at 02's feet and embedded itself in the earth without needing to be hammered. Then 02 was instructed to walk 10 meters away from the nail. He managed this easily with no adverse effects. The experiment was relatively uneventful until 02 attempted to flee the scene and was terminated for his escape attempt. The body was disposed of, and the research team made note of their findings. The nail does not work if the subject is not casting a shadow. So if total darkness kept the nail from working, and bright light meant it worked completely, what would happen if the light changed in the middle of the experiment? 2 hours before sunrise, the very same night, another D-Class was brought into the site. The subject, 03, was instructed to walk away from the nail in a straight line until he was told to stop. 2 hours later, when the sun came up, all hell broke loose. 03 was pulled into pieces as his body attempted to make its way back to the direction of the nail by any means necessary. His legs were yanked back towards the nail and were collected several feet from it. His torso, on the other hand, was located 106 meters away from the nail, with signs of road rash and severe trauma. 3 cleanup teams were required to remove all evidence of the carnage. The nail was removed to test facility 25-H, and the team decided to put an end to any further experimentation involving sunrise. Several lighting-based experiments followed the sunrise disaster, all with relatively uneventful findings. The research continued in this way until one member of the research team, Dr. Cho, posited a new question. What happens if the nail is embedded in 2 overlapping shadows? 2 other members of D-Class personnel, 04 and 05, were positioned under stadium lights so that their shadows overlapped. The nail was dropped onto a point where the shadows were on top of each other and promptly embedded itself in the ground. Both subjects were instructed to attempt to move away from the nail. 05 was completely trapped, unable to move her feet or walk away. Meanwhile, 04 was able to move freely with no consequences except for a feeling of a chill. So the nail is only able to hold one person at a time. in an attempt to see if there is a pattern present in terms of which person the nail will hold. If presented with multiple options, a follow-up experiment was conducted with 8 members of D-Class personnel, ranging in age from 18 to 59 years old. All 8 subjects were placed with their shadows overlapping, and the nail was dropped onto the point of overlap. The youngest subject, an 18-year-old boy, was held still by the nail. The other 7 test subjects let out a scream when the nail hit the ground, and were reported to shiver throughout the duration of the test. When the 18-year-old was taken out of the study and the experiment was repeated, the second youngest person in the group was held in place. The experiment was repeated 4 more times, removing a subject each time until subject 07 collapsed from hypothermia. The next experiment was conducted outside, in a grassy field near the test site. Subject 05 was placed on the grass and handed a shovel. Once the nail was firmly in the subject's shadow, she was instructed to dig it out of the dirt. 05 began digging and proceeded normally at first. After 90 seconds, however, she fell to the ground screaming in agony. A medic rushed to her side, but by the time he reached her side, she was already dead. An autopsy determined that subject 05 died of a cerebral hemorrhage with no clear physical cause, though it appears that the attempt to remove the nail is what killed her. The research team decided to take a break from human trials and take a closer look at the physical properties of the nail itself. What weaknesses did it have? Could it be destroyed? Subject 09 was given the nail and a collection of tools, then instructed to go to town on the object and attempt to destroy it. 09 placed the nail in a vise and attempted to go at it with an angle grinder. As soon as the grinder touched the nail, 09 fell to the ground seizing and speaking in tongues, hands pressed to his temples. 30 seconds later, he was dead from the same kind of cerebral hemorrhage that killed subject 05. Examination of the nail revealed a small amount of surface damage, showing that the nail likely can be destroyed, but is somehow able to defend itself against destruction. Regular human trials were resumed the next day, and Subject 10 was brought into the test facility. There, one stadium light was placed on a computer-controlled track, allowing the light to be shifted incrementally from a remote point outside of the room. The light was set up to cast a long shadow, and the nail was dropped into the shadow's head. Immediately, Subject 10 was unable to walk away from the nail, in keeping with the standard effects of SCP-272. Then the light was slowly raised, moving the shadow. The subject was dragged along as the shadow moved, as if yanked by his feet. He stumbled and had to work to regain his balance. Then the light was moved quickly. Again, the subject was dragged along with the motion of the shadow. However, due to the rapid pace of the light's motion, he was unable to keep his balance and fell to the floor, receiving scrapes, bruises, and mild road rash. Finally, in an attempt to see what might happen if the subject was unable to move even against his will, 10 was restrained. His feet were chained to the floor and a chicken wire screen was placed between him and the nail. Then the light was moved again. To the horror of the research team watching, these restraints did nothing to lessen the nail's hold on the subject. He was pulled forward violently, and the chains ripped from the floor and his body slowly forced itself through the chicken wire, landing on the other side in a pile of tiny pieces, like a potato shot through a tennis racket. No matter what is holding them down or what is in their way, a subject cannot escape the pull of their shadow or the prison of the nail. They will be bound to it, even if it kills them. Testing was temporarily suspended while a cleaning crew attended to the room, taking the rest of the day to get the bloodstains out of the concrete. The final experiment on record was conducted the following day. Subject D-272-04 was placed in the center of the room, with one stadium light casting his shadow at a 45-degree angle. The nail was dropped onto 04's shadow and he was held in place. Then the research team simply waited. Food and water was provided every few hours as well as a bucket to use as a bathroom. For the first 2 days, the subject seemed relatively normal, if exhausted and upset. On the third day, he did not respond to food or water when it was offered. After a week had passed, the subject began to speak in rapid manic screams of what was determined to be a dead language. By day 11, the subject was switching back and forth between bursts of intense ranting and a catatonic state. Finally, after 14 days pinned to the spot by the nail, Subject 04 was set free. As soon as the nail was removed, they began speaking English again. They were severely malnourished and visibly traumatized, but immediately began to recover once freed from the nail's hold. Portions of the subject's rants were recorded and translated by Dr. Kimuro, who attempted to interview the subject on the 14th day of the study. At one point, the subject said,
"I cannot sleep. The screams are heard. I am not warm. The shadow steals."
When asked how he was feeling, The subject began to tear at the skin on his arms and shout,
I am the prisoner of my own foolishness. Let my flesh crumble like the apple whose ashes burn at my tongue!
Not the most cheerful thing to hear, but not too out of the ordinary for a day's work at the SCP Foundation either. Following this experiment, human experimentation with SCP-272 was suspended until further notice. SCP-272 is kept in a small wooden box, hidden in a vault at Sector 25. Because nothing happens to the object as long as it is left alone, no further containment procedures are considered necessary. When the nails were moved from containment for experimentation, staff have been instructed to take extra care not to drop it. SCP-272 is considered a safe class SCP due to its inability to act on its own. It does not appear to do anything when left alone. However, there is clearly a great deal more to that little nail than meets the eye. Somehow, it is able to wreak psychic havoc on those it traps, and on anyone who might try to harm it. The more we learn about the nature of SCP-272, the more questions crop up. Where did it come from? How does it get inside people's heads? What did Subject 04 mean by the shadow steals? We may never know. But if you find yourself picking up any strange nails one of these days, make sure you don't drop them. Now go check out SCP-999 the Tickle Monster and SCP-978 Desire Camera for more of our favorite safe class SCPs.